Good morning.
Morning, Doc.
Good to see you.
My
Uh,
life is good.
so today I have a stress test. They put you on the treadmill.
Yes.
I have it at noon. And I was thinking just a few minutes ago that, hey, uh, all I can have is water after midnight before this test. Of course I'm going to be stressed. No coffee, no breakfast, just water. Anyway, but yeah, that's coming up for me. It just is another reminder. I sent you a picture of the two old man Muppets, and it's a little bit of who we are. But uh, not to be grouchy though. Uh, but I think insightful. I think we get to talk about things going on in our world and in the world of care and even in parenting that really make a difference, but really kind of have a seasoned balance to them. Um, so I want to start off by saying, is there merit to being able to work with students if you've raised children? Is there
Yes.
merit? And what is that merit? So what do you think about that?
Well, I think for me, the merit is that, at this age, Doc, I'm glad I'm no longer raising children. Not that I lament the age, don't hear that, but I'm glad that I am not fully responsible for that task. It is an enormous task. And I think that when I was within the confines of it, I never felt the enormity of it. I never shunned the enormity of it. I welcomed it and loved it. But at this age, the prospect of doing that again as a full time parent would be overwhelming to me. Okay?
It's pretty daunting, and I think of all the grandparents that are raising
Yeah, me
their
too.
grandchildren. Yeah, we see that a lot in the area that I live. And I'm sure it's happening in other places as well. But yeah, I think it is. It is a big challenge. I wonder if it was a big challenge and we were just blind to it when we were doing it. If we were just, I wonder if our parents and the generation above them thought, "Wow, the same thing you and I are thinking right now about raising parents." If that is just a matter of perspective.
It's hard to say, Doc, but I can tell you that I loved it, though. There was not a moment of it that I didn't love and welcome and plow through as to the best of my ability or my inability. But your question of can we then offer care and insight and directives to those that are in the middle of those planes right now, because I think much of parenting is just walking on the plane. It's not in the mountain and it's not in the valley so much, it's in the plane. And my answer is yes, I think we can. I think you and I bring, humbly and respectfully, education and insight and credentials and vast numbers of humans that we have sat with, in the deepest of trenches and walked alongside, while they were riding in their Conestoga wagon over the plains to get to their destination. So yes, I think we can. Do I think we're a solitary voice? Of course not. That's foolishness, isn't it? But I think we bring an informed position that has value. Let's say it like that. Yes, I think we can, and I think we do.
I think that there's a lot of content wisdom. I mean, that's what it's always been called, wisdom
Oh,
that comes from the two higher generations when it comes to dealing with children that I think are missed. And there's a switching that happens or is happening. It happened, I think, when I was parenting, where we didn't look at people that raised kids as the source of wisdom. We looked at people that had certain education. I mean, it goes all the way back to Dr. Spock and the 50s, 60s. Uh, uh, that's where you got your information. That the people that had already completed the child rearing ages were out of date with the real best methodologies and the best understanding of children. Now that I'm in that older group, I'm like, no, I don't think that's true at all. I think that having raised children, whether you did it well or poorly, whether it went well or it went poorly, you have an insight into the development of the human being that you do not have without having raised children.
I would agree with that. And the other thing I would say, Doc, is I notice in the work that we do, and you and I are practitioners, I think we should always just hammer that nail. We are not, we're both academics, but we are both practitioners. We are in this world.
Yeah, more
And I
than
notice,
anything.
yeah, and I noticed that you use the word milieu, and perhaps we talk about that in days to come. But I noticed that parents, especially when I'm dealing with them, whether it be a mom or a dad or like an extended family member that's raising the child, I noticed that I don't want to use the word defer to me, Doc, in session, but they certainly lean and tilt and kind of push into the wind that I'm suggesting to them. And I will tell you, I've been doing this a long, long time, Doc. I notice it more now than I've ever noticed it before. Now, is it because I'm more aware of it? I don't think so. And I think it comes back to this mood that you have begun this conversation with of what what instills confidence in parenting? What does that? And my answer is I think that for us, it is this whole combination of you and I and the work that we do and the education that we bring and the effort, Doc, that we exhibit on a daily basis. It is incontrovertible, Doc, that you and I and the work that we do and the team that we work with and the system that you have erected, sir, it is incontrovertible that that constitutes care. And I think that it is a rescue mechanism for the people that we serve. How do you see that?
Oh, I think so. I think that there is an inherent need in parenting to have supports. And I think historically that support has been extended family, specifically grandparents. We even see references in biblical writings that there's this blessing of having the grandparent. And so there are some forces. I'm sitting here thinking about this topic with you. There are some forces that that I think do put pressure on this idea of support. One of them is the dividing up of the family because of the vast number of divorces. So now you have all these segmented family groups that they may be larger. Now they're, instead of 2 sets of grandparents, you have 4 sets of grandparents or 6 sets of grandparents. However, the growth in that number may have actually diminished some of their influence and their capacity to support. It has created rifts and breaches that often go unrepaired. And so I think about just some of the weddings having to perform, and you have these weddings, and we're going to have all this conflict about where these multiple sets of grandparents are going to sit. And if that just plays out in that kind of setting, how is that playing out in everyday life when a parent is needing support? How? So I think that's one big issue. This breaking apart of kind of a extended nuclear family. The other thing is how rapidly culture, specifically technology, is changing. That influx of information, that influx of technological differences creates a gap generationally. That isn't just like a gap of whether or not the old people are cool or not, but it's a gap of experience. So grandparents having to did not raise kids with cell phones. My parents did not raise us with cell phones and smartphones and technology. And so I think that this massive change in technology that happens so rapidly now, much more rapidly than it did in the past. Not that there weren't some profound technological changes, going from the horse and wagon to the car, that was a big deal. However, that took much, much longer to happen than we see what's happening, for example, with the smartphone. So I think that that's the other thing that has distanced the wisdom and the awareness from the old generation to the current parents. So when it comes to application, you said earlier that, we're practitioners. So often what I think is passed down developmentally from the older generation is how do you practice parenting? What is that day-to-day grind? What do I do with this small infraction or this small issue that could snowball into something bigger? How do I redirect it? How do I address it? I think because of the technological differences, sometimes grandparents are like, I don't know what you do about that. I think about a grandparent right now who is asked by their children who are raising kids when that parent is having this all-out war about whether or not their kid can have a cell phone. I mean, it is a all-out war in many homes. And I think a grandparent says simply no. They don't even understand how big of a deal that can be unless they get to watch it and observe some of it. But it can be pretty nasty. The child feels incredibly offended. The parent feels guilty, and all over whether or not a student can have access to their own cell phone, regardless of how dangerous it is, how open to predators they are, to how much lack of control they have, all the kinds of child driven content that's out there, they have full access to. That's ignored in this battle. And I don't know that grandparents have the practical answer for something like that.
Well, my sense is, Doc, is that we're inside again of a very important topic. And you brought up this topic. I love when we just allow the moment to arise. You brought up this topic as how do we, meaning a current parent, a current guardian, how do they find insight to properly raise their kid right now? And then you mentioned war, because the wars that are taking place inside of families that you and I and people that do the work that we do are the ones that are trying to separate the parties into neutral camps. is so real. And I read this article, Doc, not too long ago that shocked me, and yet it made sense to me. And the article said that really the purveyors of AI, and look, we all live in this culture, are in the end creating a form of God. And that got my attention.
Wow.
And I thought, well, what does that mean? And so as I read it and I plowed into the article, it talked about this sentient capacity for an external device to have the ability to make choices that impact humans. That got my attention. And that really, Doc, is what is happening in our culture. And you and I and the people like us, men, women who plow into these conflicts, because you're right, this is war, are the ones that are, if you will, working as hard as we can to first separate the parties and then to distinguish what it is that the battle is really about. And then from there to be able to erect some form of reasonable standards that this family can deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Because the moms and dads or the grandparents or the guardians, you are 100% right, Doc. I have never thought of it as war until you said it, but it is a battle. And when we see these young men come into our world who flat out are furious, and I mean violently furious many times, Doc, as you know, because someone has dared to have the temerity to take away their electronics. And the moms and the dads notice the slide, Doc. They notice the slide. And then they call upon us almost as last resort. Help me. Isn't that the white flag that goes up?
That is, and it's not because of their lack of effort or their
Yeah.
desire or their love. It it is a battle, and where is the support for that? Um, and and I think, to be honest, there are also the older generation that looks at their use of a device or something, and they see it casual use, like it's not that big of a deal. They may not be aware of what it is, and what it's doing in a child's or a teenager's life. I mean, uh, if they knew that that child is spending 3 and 5 hours a night after everyone goes to bed on that device, if they knew how often. So there may be just metrics that they're not aware of that really should be communicated
And I think,
and
Doc,
needs
if
to be
we plow into that, that's such a great thought. Again, I haven't thought of this till today. But you and I see, I don't want to speak for you. I see devices as functional. They help me do things. The children and adolescents and young adults that you and I see in practice, they view devices as family. It is,
highly relational. They are necessary elements for social relationship. And that's what students were telling me all the time. Well, how no one student told me nobody just goes over and visits people anymore. What do? You expect me to write a letter? I mean, that they have left the functionality of technology, and this becomes a fabric of connection that is absolutely necessary, and they're desperate for it developmentally. I mean, social interactions are primary learning contexts for adolescents, and so they they have embraced technology as being relational. And it's not just the cell phone. And the smartphone. It's social media. It's also video games. They aren't using video games as a functional tool. They're using it as a place to belong. Well, and maybe that's not so bad, because I think about someone who plays baseball and they belong. However, it's a very detached belonging. So I think I would come back and modify my thought here that the detached belonging is a problem, not necessarily a place to belong. Because again, that is, I think, developmentally something that they're looking to answer in adolescence. It's not a tool. You're right. We look at these as technology as a tool to help us live our embodied lives better, that drives us toward people, human interactions, and human relationships. They are not seeing technology the same way our generation and the generations before us saw it. And it is incredibly emerged into relationship. It is their relational touch point.
So,
And
Doc,
it's virtual.
and this is when you and I and people like us around the world that are practitioners of the healing arts, that's really what we are. It is an art form that we have. There is science behind it and beside it, but it is an art form. And so this is what cues a person that is a parent many times, Doc, to make the phone call, to do the reach out, to send out the SOS. And so right now there are people listening, perhaps, and maybe there aren't, but there are families that have no solve. Because when they try to put the barriers up, Doc, when they try to put the restraint, when they attempt to say 2 hours max, you are right. War breaks out in that home. So, my question is, what is it about this connection with devices that causes such oft times violent outbursts in the students and the young people that you and I then come along to treat and their intel families? Let's talk about
I think a simple answer that I would give, and it's quite simplistic. I'm actually reading a book right now that I want us to talk about in the future that is really targeted at trying to answer that question about the anxiety levels of the young generation, young adolescents and young adults, incredibly anxious. And I believe that is part of the reason why they are so violently reactive. And I say violently, that's not an exaggeration. But physical altercations, the breaking and throwing of property, that really happens when a boundary is set with technology. I think it is because not only do they have their relationships emerged in there, and developmentally, an adolescent, those are primary learning contexts. So they're trying to get the answers about life from social relationships. Those social relationships are wrapped up in the virtual world. That's one. Number two is the unintended consequence of this constant connectivity is heightened anxiety. So they also, at the same time, aren't just feeling like they're being ripped away from their peers, or that they're being forbidden to be with their peers. They are having a physiological response to disconnection from technology. High anxiety. Whether it's just because we've interrupted patterns of check my phone, check my phone, check my phone, check my phone, Or so we may just be interrupting those patterns, and that's enough to be disconcerting. But we are a higher level of feeling lost because they don't have any connection. They don't have connection with the spiritual. They don't have connection with the world, like the nature. They don't have connection with quiet. They don't. There's a part of themselves that has to constantly be fed input. And when you stop that feeding, fear sets in.